Okay, so using my dedicated photo etch removing knife, which has a chisel blade and gives me a really nice close cut, I'm just going to remove that. Now this you might think is waste, but actually it makes a really good seam scraper. Honestly, I haven't got something I can show you, I don't think. There you go. I'm going to use the edge of this sprue. We've got a bit of a seam there. And if I just drag that along the end, you can see that's taken material off. So this is really good because it's stronger than the brass photo etch. Although this is quite thin, even for Tamiya, it's really good. So you can cut that, put a point on it and create something not dissimilar to that out of this, and you've made yourself a little seam scraper. So yeah, always worth having a look at these little things to see if you can make some form of tool or give you an advantage. I've got seam scrapers, so for me it's just for throwing away. Right, okay, let's have a look at forming this. So looking at the instructions, what it's telling me to do is place it with this cutout facing up in these two holes at the back, like so. So insert photo etch part, then bend photo etch part and push down. So I'm bending the photo etch part, and then this has a little cutout that aligns with that notch. There we go. So in theory that has now formed my shape for me. And then it says bend side down with C13. Okay, well, that's actually stayed in the tool, which suggests there's still a little bit of spring left in it. Okay, that's interesting. Let's see if we can get that out. Here we go. I'm going to put it back on because it's step 3 is to turn this around and press it down against the back there. So let's make sure they're in the slots. Press it down, give it a good squish. And there we go, we've got a perfectly formed bit of photo etch grill there. You know, that would look lovely on the Airfix Stalwart, wouldn't it? Right, let's just double check that that fits. Yeah, it needs a gentle squeeze, but that goes in there really nicely, and that's going to look really, really good when that's done. So happy with that. That I can put to one side now, and that is ready to be painted up. So just get a little clip. There we go, and we can airbrush that when we're doing the rest of the painting. So that's the exhaust cover done. Next thing on my agenda is the jack, which gets installed here. This is painted again the same colour as the rest of the vehicle, so potentially we could mount that as well. What we'll do is we'll build it up and take a view. So let's get that jack built up. It's basically 4 parts, which I have already cleaned up. So let's look at that. We have a little plate here that faces up this, which goes on there like that. That seems to fit nicely, so just gonna hold that together with my tweezers so that I've not got fingers that could cause gluey fingerprints. Got a hair there that I couldn't see. I don't want to glue that on, so we'll just take that off. Okay, and then we have this which sits on the end. So I think we'll just get some glue in there and make it a bit sticky. There we go. Okay, and then we've got the handle which goes in the back here. With that on the top. So okay, so that looks good. Let's just have a look at where it goes. So it goes the other way around. Now there is another tool that gets attached to this, but I wouldn't propose installing that until after the painting is done. Yeah, I think that is actually going to obstruct a little bit the painting process, so we'll leave it as a assembly, but it was worth looking at. Right, then we have a flexible hose that goes across here. I'm not going to put that in because that's a different colour, so I want to do the painting. But I do have a couple of hooks that we can attach, and then I want to have a look at this area here. We've got a couple of parts we can fit. And potentially we might be able to install those before we paint as well. So let's deal with the little hooks. We've already done some on this side, so it's exactly the same process. So let me just get them. There we go. And just double check your orientation with your instructions. So I just need to turn my page over. Okay, so I'm on step 18 now. So just turn that round. It's in my tweezers the right way. And that first one goes on there like so. And then this second one going on there. Okay, that's our hooks on. Just check that they're pushed in and square. Yes, they are. Right, so we have this little thing to make up. Now, quite correctly, they have put wood grain on here, although the wood grain is excessive. So this was a wooden holder, and the aerial folds down into it. And I've seen people weather this with metal wood chips, but it is wood. So Tamiya have got this quite correct. However, you wouldn't see the wood grain quite as clearly as they're put on. So if you want to sand it smooth, that would be equally as acceptable as leaving it. I'm going to leave it just for fun, but I'm not going to accentuate it with a wash or anything. We'll just paint it and see what happens. Right, these two parts are very thin and very fiddly, so we're going to glue this into place in sections, I think, starting at this end here, which has got the most contact point. So if I can get this aligned and put my little clamp on it, there we go. Then glue in the seam. There we go. And then this end is very delicate and flimsy, so we're gluing that last. So the question now is, can I get that into place and be able to paint around it? So it slots in here and here. So yeah, I think that can go in and be painted. I don't know if it's going to give me a fit issue with the little hose, so let me remove the hose and try. Okay, so if I hold that in place as it's been glued, can I then get this hose to sit? So let's do it the right way around. No is the answer. I need a little bit of height to drop this pin in. So unfortunately that's going to stay off. So unfortunately it doesn't really make any difference. So that becomes another sub-assembly for separate painting. The hose here is painted a different colour, so that's got to be painted separately anyway, but while we've got it out we might as well test fit it. I'll clean that up in a minute, so that's ready to go. Now we do have this part as well, which forms the hinge for the aerial. And let's get that orientated the right way. So that goes over my hose. Yeah, again, I'm going to struggle. So that's going to stay as a separate part as well. So this curved end that we've got on the hose, we can just sort that out with a sponge. I'm using a 600 grit sponge and just taking down the nub there and blending that in. That's a nice quick job. I don't see any issues underneath. We'll just square off the end a little bit, although it's going to be hard to see it. There was a nub on there, so it does need treatment. And then just belt and braces, just take along the seam. I can see where the seam is, but I don't believe it's actually very proud, so I don't think it's an issue particularly. Anyway, that's the hose cleaned up, so that took no time at all. So that's gonna put me next, I think, on the turret. I'm just gonna check if there's anything else we can put on this upper hull. Well, the only other thing we can put on is this lamp here. So this is part B34. It's nicely done, nice little detail, and it has an under sprue gate. So we just want to remove that. So I'm just going to get it as flush as I can, and I'm going to go in with my flat sanding stick at 600 and just take that back. And it actually highlights a couple of little ejector pins under there, which you're going to get rid of at the same time. There we go, that's good. And then you have the main piece go in. Now you need to take the sprue gate off there so it sits properly, because that's the bit that goes inside your lamp, which is nice design and nice thought from Tamiya. Okay, so that's in. So we can just glue that now. There we go, and then that installs here in that big hole, I think. That's right. It looks a bit confused on the instructions because they have that in front of it, but we're just dropping it into this big hole. There we go. Make sure it's nice and straight. And oh, I was going to say we can glue it in from underneath, but only if we don't turn it upside down. So just plop it back in. Yeah, the fit here is somewhat loose. As you can see, the pin is tiny compared to it. So just going to run a bit of glue underneath. There we go. That looks good. Right, so next job is on with the turret. So the turret top comes as one big piece, but I'm going to get all the parts out before we clean up. This is, I think, slide molded. We've got a seam there, you can see that line, and another one there. That's indication of slide molding, and it always leaves that witness, so we just need to take that off. But be careful, because you do have weld detail on here which we don't want to remove. So a little bit of careful scraping should deal with that. We can work that down. Yeah. Okay, so let me get all the parts out and then we'll have a look if there's any comments on the cleanup needed. Right, these are all my parts. So we're ready to assemble the turret. So we're starting at step 19, which is inserting the machine guns into this. They are handed, so you need to do them the right way around. I'm just going to put a little bit of glue in the location point first, just to get it a bit sticky, and then we can get that in, get it the right way around. There we go. So it has a little shaped location pin, so you can't put it in the wrong one without having a fit issue. So there we go, nice and square. And then we do the same on the other side. Okay, now there is a part that goes in the middle. We're going to come back to that because before the glue fully dries on these guns, I want to install these, which just lock them into place. So that's our first one. And our second one. There you go. And that just helps correct the position. Okay, that's looking good. I'm just going to put that on a clamp, and we can put this piece in at the back now. So again, I'm going to get it sticky and plop this in. Like so. So there's a little bit of play in the machine guns. So there we go. So that is in and looking good. Just make sure that's nice and square. You ain't gonna see this. There's all sorts of paint instructions for the internal details. You're just not gonna see them if you put the driver in. If you're not putting the driver in, there's not enough internal detail to have the lid open. So I ain't gonna bother. Okay, so we'll let that dry for a sec. Then we can get to the main event. So that's the lower and upper turret. That clips together really, really nicely. So we can just flood the gap there with a bit of airbrush cleaner. And then I'm just going to hold that point and that point together and make sure it's nice and tight before I just put some glue in that gap. There we go. So that's the two halves of the turret done. All goes together really nicely. We do have some hooks to mount on the top amongst these other bits and pieces, so I'm going to do the hooks first before I lose them. So I'm just going to place them in, just check my orientation. So yeah, that one. So these are basically the lifting hooks for lifting the turret on and off. Fit of that's a bit tight. Let's try another one. Right, that one's gone in. Let's try at the front. So they face forward at the front. Yeah, I've got one hook that seems to be slightly oversized, but it has gone in. There we go. Right, let's get those glued in now. Okay, that's the hooks on. Then we have a strip that goes along the front here, and again you've got little pips underneath for mounting it. I have already test fitted this, so I know it fits really well. There we go. And that allows for this to mount on. Now if you're having the lid closed, there's a couple of lugs you've got to remove, otherwise you're okay. But that's going to stop me getting in and painting, so that becomes a separate part to paint, so we're going to leave that off. And then we've got these little lids to put on. So just got to find the right one. As me taking the parts off and cleaning them up means I don't have the right ones anymore. Right. Am I putting them on the right place? Oh no, I'm putting them in the wrong one, that's why. So that one goes there. It doesn't have a vision port slot in it. So place that on. A little bit of glue on the inside. Brill. Which means we do have a viewport one at the back. Like so. Just make sure that's the right way around. It doesn't quite show you in the instructions, but it is 2 rivets at the top. And then this last one goes on this side like so. So that built up really quite quickly, didn't it? The last thing that we need to do is install this, which is sufficiently dried now, and that just drops into place almost like it was designed to go there. Right, so there we go. That is as far as I'm taking the turret before we paint. I will paint the inside in the white, I think. But I need to do some research and just check what colour the inside of the turret lid was, whether that was still blue when open or white. We do have, with this being open, we do have some ejector pins, so I've left that so we could come back and have a look at it. They are all raised, so they shouldn't be too difficult to remove. Just going to clean my abrasive up a little bit. There we go. I'll do the other side while we're at it, whilst I've got it out. There we go. Breathe some life into it before we have to peel it off and put it back on again. Right, so I'm using what's this? Triangle A. and that's just going to allow me to go in where we've got all this sort of detail and stuff and just slowly take that back. And then I think I can scrape it smooth when it's nearly gone. There we go. So nearly there. As soon as I don't see any evidence of it, I'll move on and do the others. So it's just a quick process of blending it in, really. Okay, there we go. I can do the others off camera. Well, so far this has gone together beautifully. That's the main bulk of the tank put together, ready for paint. So the next thing is I want to build up the figure and then all the accessories that are going to go on here. We'll leave the track for now, because that'll be something we do before we put this final part on. You can see the gluing these on has not interfered with our ability to fit this at all. So look, goes together perfectly well. But we can build up the wheels and what have you, so that once this is painted we can start building it up and we can paint them all together. So I'm going to do all sorts of different ways of painting this, because what I really want to do is put the Tamiya enamel paints through the test. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do some things by airbrush, we're going to do some things by hand, and see how we get on. We're going to prime the top part, the turret and the top part, in a dark red, sort of the colour it would have originally been primed in on the real thing. And then on the lower hull, what we're going to do is we're going to brush paint, and we're not going to prime, and see how the paint behaves, and just experiment a little bit with it so I can understand what does and what doesn't work. So yeah, what we'll do is we'll build it all up sort of factory fresh, minus the tracks, then we'll weather it all, and the very last thing we'll do is put the tracks on and then put it all together, and then finishing touches at the figure. That's the basic process. I do actually have a small diorama base for it as well, so we're gonna put that together. So let's have a quick look at that. Hi, hope you're enjoying the video. I put a lot of effort into making these videos, putting them together, recording them, editing. It takes up so much time. I would really love it if you could just hit that like button for me. It will take you a fraction of a second, and it costs you nothing, and it means so much to me and the channel, and will help other people who might enjoy this video find it. You done it? Thank you. Well, I thought it'd be nice to have this sort of trundling down a street, so I've got this, and I actually want to see if this is big enough for it or not. So let's get it out and have a look. So this is a resin cobbled street with a 3-part resin street lamp, which you can or don't have to add. Put that to one side. Let's just see if that is... Oh yeah, that'll go on okay. So we'll have our tank on a little street there. So just got to decide. Yeah. So gonna give myself a little challenge here and say we're also gonna paint the base with the same Tamiya paints that we're using for this. So just a reminder, we're using Tamiya enamels that were called out by the instructions for this only. So we're going to have to do a bit of paint mixing if we want different effects and colours. So set myself a little challenge, should be a little bit of fun, but also it allows me to go outside of just the tank with trying the paints. So there we go. Let's do we put the lamp on or do we not put the lamp on? I think it might be nice. I mean, they've got it here in a similar colour, but I think I think a nice sort of green or something like that would contrast nicely against that. So I guess we are doing that as well. So the base itself doesn't really need much in the way of prep before we paint it, other than giving it a wash, I think. Yeah, I think that's all we need to worry about, is giving that a wash. So that'll get a bit of a soapy wash. And let's just have a look at the lamppost. So the actual lamppost itself, cool, the lamp is pretty naff. As is the post. I think we could possibly replace that with some plastic rod. Have I got some of the right diameter? Let's just have a look. No, there you go. We could replace that with some plastic rod, I think. Yeah. So if we clean that up, cut that off, glue that on, glue the top piece on, put that on. I don't know what that's supposed to be. So the lamppost comes in 3 parts. Yeah, it's a little bit rough around the edges, if I'm honest. And the glazing isn't very central. I mean, look at that. I'm not overly impressed with the lamp. I might have a better lamp in the attic. I'm sure I've got an old Tamiya one somewhere. We certainly could, if we do use this, we could replace with some plastic rod. Let's. I'm going to have a route in my bits of diorama box in the attic. I think we might be replacing this lamp due to the fact that it doesn't look very good. Well, I've decided with the figure that I'm going to go with the chap with the beret, because I'm doing early war. you get a cap version of the head as well. And it looked, at first I thought, oh, don't like the berry, it's a bit lacking detail, but actually that's because it comes with decals for the markings on the front, which should be pretty cool. There's a lot of heavy seam on this though, so that you need a lot of careful cleanup on the beret. Just take that nub down. And then we'll just go over, this is 1500. Right, I think that's looking okay. And then seam around the ears and down the neck. Usual locations for seam. Okay, that's the head done. Let's have a look at the two parts of the body. So the nub is on the belt and on the bottom here, which won't get seen obviously. So I'm just going to slice that out with my blade. I've freshly sharpened the blade to make sure we could do a good job of that. We can correct it more fully when the two halves are glued together. There we go. And I'll just take the nubs off the bottom there, just so they don't foul putting the two halves together. So let's see how they go. Well, they go together really nicely. So if I hold him in the middle, okay. So that's looking really quite nice. Let's have a look at the head position. Yeah, that's okay. I'm actually going to go in on the side seam of the head there with a sponge and just make sure there's no sharp edges. We don't want to be caught out when we're painting. Right, yeah. Now you could, if you wanted, keep the head separate for the purposes of painting. I'm not going to though. So there we go. He's got a fairly serious but authentic looking face, I think. Tamiya have done a good job of the facial features there. Right, let's have a look at this arm. So our nub is at the bottom there, so again a little bit of knife work just to dig it out and put a crease in underneath it. And we can use the sponge to de-seam because it's not very prominent on this part. There we go. Pistol, the nub was on the top, so I'm just going to thin that down with my knife a little bit. And I am going to have to go in with something a little bit more abrasive to get that down. There we go. Then we can go back in with our sponge. This is a 1000 sponge. Just blend that in on the top of the case. Right, let's get that put onto our guy. Which side have they got him with his pistol? So, there, okay. I was looking for a little cutout and there it is. So it's on his back hip. That sits in really quite nicely. Yeah, look at that. Doesn't that look good? Okay, right. So this arm that we've cleaned up can go on. And then it's drying ahead of putting the next one on. Yeah, no gaps, and look how it fits nicely on where the pistol is. It's really nicely engineered. Okay, one arm left to do, so we'll just clean that up. That nub's a bit easier. It's on the side of his hand this time, the seam. Okay, that all looks good. So let's get this last arm on. Just hold that in. Spot of glue. Okay, I'm interested to see how that mounts on our tank now. So there is a little thing you can just see inside. I guess he sits on there. Like so, and then we'll have our little there. Let's get that into place. Just interested to see the position. Ah, well that looks alright, I'm happy with that. Okay, just venturing out into using these Tamiya enamel paints for the first time. So, I'm going to be doing all sorts of different experiments during the course of painting up this model. First thing is mixing. So the instructions ask you to paint the exhaust using 1 part 56 metallic grey and 2 parts 64 red brown. So that's what we've done in this palette. So that's the colour we're ending up with. So you've got a metallic colour with a rusty tint to it. It's actually quite a nice colour. So I'm going to add some thinner, and the thinner that I'm using throughout this is White Spirit because I've not got enamel, Tamiya enamel thinners. So I'm just going to put one decent drop in there and give that a mix. So what I'm interested to see is how well does this mix? Does the paint work well with the White Spirit? I'm using odorless White Spirits, and I've got to say the odour coming off this enamel, because obviously the post the European Union change on ingredients for enamel paints, you can hardly smell it. I mean, you can. It's stronger than acrylic, but nothing like it used to be. Nothing like enamels used to be back in the 70s and 80s when I was a kid. So yeah, that's thinning really quite well. So I would normally thin it perhaps a little bit more for brush painting, but I'm interested to see, you can see there how slowly that's sort of coming back. It's quite slow moving, so absolutely too thick for an airbrush, just slightly too thick for a paintbrush. But we have no primer on this, so I'm going to paint straight on the plastic and see how it behaves. So what I'm looking for is, when it's dry, how well it's going to scrub off. You know, how tough is it, how resistant to being handled it is. I'm also going to be interested to see how well it bonds initially. You know, is it going to fisheye or anything like that? Don't expect it to, with it being not acrylic. That's more of an acrylic problem, really. And how does it behave? You know, could I use it as a primer? Do I need to prime? Can I use it as a primer? That's sort of what I'm initially trying to understand. How many coats? So we're going to do one coat with this, so we're going to do 2 coats with this. You know, how's that going to work out? All of these questions in my head, we're going to start finding out. Well, I've got to say, this is going down absolutely really, really lovely. I can already see it drying. Now I have to let you know, I have used this paint already a few minutes ago while the washing machine was still running. I've just paused it to do this little bit. I think that is everything painted up. Look at that. There is no witness at all of any brush marks. That has gone down really nice. Now, I have just brush painted with XF1, so that's another thing to say about these enamels. The Tamiya enamels use the same numbering system as the acrylics, so most of us are familiar with those. So this is one coat laid on by a big thick brush. We used a Humbrol number 6 brush to apply it. It had quite a bit of thinner put into it, which means the paint's going to go quite a long way. And that is one coat. And I've got to be honest, I've put that down as a black primer. I was using it to put some black down in some places on the inside of the hull, just to darken it. I had plenty left over, and I've gone over that with one black coat. And although I will be doing another coat over the top, that has gone down really nice, and it's touch dry in under 15 minutes, about 12 minutes. And you know, I can handle that. That's not coming off. I'm not changing it. So yeah, really impressed with the behaviour of that paint. I mean, look at that. It is going to need a second coat. I can see the paint's a little thinner in places than others, but that's probably down to the brush I'm using. If I'd used a wider brush, we'd probably be okay. Now that is touch dry. While we've been talking, I mean, you've seen how long ago I put that on. I've not paused the camera since we put that on, and that is touch dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try a second coat. I'm going to put another spot of thinner in there. Now usually, if this was an acrylic paint, for example, what would happen is, as I put that on with the thinner in, the thinner would loosen the not yet dried paint and it would just mix it up again. So I'm going to see if that happens here. And the answer is no. It hasn't disturbed the paint underneath, or at least if it has, not significantly, that you're putting brush strokes back into it. So that is deeply impressive. Yeah, that's working really well. And yeah, I really like the colour actually. So the mix that's suggested in the instructions is working well for me. Now before we glue that in, we will do some weathering and bring out some details and just make that pop and what have you. I'm going to try and do all the weathering with enamels as well, but where I'm using pastels and stuff, you know, it'd be interesting to see how the pastels stick to the enamel paints and what have you. So I have some expectations in my mind, but I'm not going to share them with you. We're going to see how these perform. But that's gone down really impressive for brush painting. Yeah, really impressive. Okay, whilst I've got this paint out, I'm just going to jog through the instructions, see if there's anything more that has this mix of colours, so we can do it at the same time, but I don't think there is. Okay, so I have painted now directly onto the plastic using a single coat, and so far quite impressed. I now want to see how the paint works when we paint it over a much larger area, and again without any primer. So we will do some painting with it primed. We're going to airbrush the top section over an airbrushed prime, and then we'll do some brush painting over primed parts such as these, so that we get a full range of tests. Why do I want to try it without primer? Because with enamel paints generally they're a bit stronger and they don't wear off so well, so you don't necessarily need all the bonding that a primer offers you for particularly for acrylic paints. So it's just understanding what you can and can't do. For me, a good paint system is a paint system that works well and easily in an airbrush, easy to clean up, and well and easily with a brush and easy to clean up. So I want to try all of those. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint the 63, which is the main colour of the tank here. And the reason why I'm doing the underside with the brush is if it looks a little bit messy, we can always cover that up with a bit of weathering. So we'll see how we get on. I'm going to use a fairly large flat wide brush so we can put the paint down and give it a fighting chance. But it's also going to allow me to get into all these details here that we've got as well. So this is probably the right brush, and it's easy for me to handle. So there. I have put some of the paint that we were just talking about that we've used on the exhaust system. I have put, because I had quite a bit left over, have put some of that down in here, because when it's fully dried I want to do a sanding test and see how that all sands, so I get a decent view of how these paints behave. Okay, so first thing, let's look at mixing the paint. So let's get you in a bit closer. So as always, don't shake your paint, stir your paint. If you shake your paint, you get paint all over the lid, and then when you take the lid off, that paint relaxes into there. Then you put your lid back on and it dries on the top here. Then you can't get your top off next time, and then when you do get your top off, you've got dry crunchy bits of paint falling back in, and so you've then got foreign object debris in your paint. It's just a nightmare, and the way to avoid that is to simply stir your paint. These things, they cost about £6. They cost absolutely nothing, you know. They're super quick, they're super easy to clean. Just why wouldn't you be doing it? So when I put it in, I can feel the paint sticker at the bottom, but it's not hard, it's just collected pigment as a sediment. So we'll just give it a gentle agitate before switching it on. So we'll just give it a little stir, then we switch the stirrer on. I like to bring it up and down. There we go. So that is thoroughly mixed. So what we're going to do now is decant some into our palette. And you can see the colour's all even. There's no rippling or anything like that, which means it's nicely mixed up. Okay, we'll go with that to start with. So just rest that there for a moment. Put my lid straight back on. That's one, odour control, but more importantly, spill control. So put that to one side. Okay, now with my brush we'll get as much paint off the mixer as we can. There we go. And then to clean this, it's so simple. This is odorless white spirit in a jar. I have two jars actually. I have a separate one for metallics, so metallic paints get cleaned in a different one. This isn't metallic. So we just simply plop it in, switch it on. There you go. Wipe it clean on a tissue. The little bit of white spirit that gets on the tissue is enough to clean anything that was further up the shaft there. There you go. I mean, that couldn't be easier, couldn't be quicker. So that's what I want from a paint system, quick and easy and flexible. Right, okay, we're going to thin this as with white spirit. So I have some that I've decanted into a dropper bottle for ease of use, and put 2 decent drops of white spirit in, and we'll give it a mix. I think we can probably get one more. There we go. Let's put the top on there. Just give that a thorough mix in. And we'll wipe it on the side. Yeah, and that's rushing down to the bottom fairly well. So that's still too thick if we were airbrushing, but for brush painting, I think we're in a good place. So let's see how this goes down. So we'll start in a big area here. Flows off the brush really nicely, is my first observation. And then if I want to go around, detail and just make sure the paint's in, I can do that. And then the slightly slower drying time of an enamel allows me to work the paint a little bit. There we go. So that won't be too even. You can see whilst the surface is fairly even and the paint's settling, which enamel paints, they give you the time to do that. We can see the brush strokes, so it will definitely be 2 coats. Let's see how we get on with some of these more difficult areas. I mean, you've got a really nice silky feel to the paint. It goes down really easily. it's staying where I want it, so there's no fish eyes. And by the way, these parts were not washed because that was all part of the challenge to see how the paint would do. And again, because the enamel paint is slightly slower in its drying time, although I can see it's starting to dry around the edges already, I do have time to get out bubbles. And you know, if this was Tamiya's acrylic paint, I'd already, as I'm working the paint, I'd already have the paint collecting under my brush and gathering, and I'd already have ruined the paint finish is what I'm saying. So let's just do the front plate here. That all looks good, and then we can move to the side. I'm going to start underneath that big spring there. And we can go over the spring. Keep working it in. And this is the joy of enamel paint. So regardless of the brand, enamel paints allow you to work like this. And then we can work away from that area. Some of these shafts have parts glued onto them, so I need to be mindful of that. Making sure I'm not putting too much on my brush, you know, you can see I'm just going for a dab. That means we're not flooding anything with paint, and we are, you know, in control. Always in control. That's what we need to ensure. Yeah, that's gone round nicely. Do the other side now. We get round all this detail again. Beautiful. Okay, that has gone down really nice. From a brush painting point of view, the paint is behaving really well. It's easy to put down, it's easy to work, it's easy to manipulate. It's not leaving lots of bubbles or anything like that, which you sometimes get with some paint systems. Yeah. Really impressed with how that has gone down first time. So I need that to dry now, and you can see, I mean, it's touch dry. You've been watching this all the time. There's no editing. I've not switched the camera off. It's touch dry really quickly. Now I can see brush strokes, but I can't feel them. So what we'll do is we'll put more thinner in for a second coat. So I'm going to leave this about 12-13 minutes or so, let that dry up. Then we'll put some more thinner into this, so we'll be able to, you know, even if the paint's starting to harden on the brush, we'll be able to loosen it all back up. And then we can have a go at a second coat underneath and see how that behaves, how hard that has become.